In today's episode of What the Constitution Says, we're going to explain why China gave Hong Kong to Britain in 1841. First, we'll discuss what China was like at that time. Then we'll talk about how the First Opium War began. Next, we'll examine the Treaty of Nanking and how it forced China to cede Hong Kong Island to Britain. Finally, we'll explain why this happened. At the time, China was ruled by the Qing dynasty, which had been in power for over 200 years. During this time, the Chinese economy and military were both very strong. However, they had recently faced a number of challenges, including natural disasters and rebellions. As a result, the Chinese government was weak and unstable. Britain, on the other hand, was at the height of its imperial powers. It had a large navy and a strong economy. The British were also very interested in China because of its vast population and natural resources. They saw China as a potential market for their manufactured goods and a source of raw materials. Despite the fact that the two countries were so different, they had a long history of peaceful relations. However, this would all change with the arrival of the Portuguese. The Portuguese had been trading in China for centuries, but they soon began to compete with the Chinese. They were able to do this because they had a monopoly on the trade of opium, which was a highly addictive drug that was very popular in China. The Chinese government tried to stop the Portuguese from selling opium, but they were unsuccessful. This led to the First Opium War, which was fought between China and Britain from 1839 to 1842. The war began when Chinese officials seized a large shipment of opium that was being smuggled into the country. The Chinese government then offered the British a chance to buy back the opium, but the British refused. Instead, they decided to start a war and force the Chinese to give them back. The war was fought over control of the Chinese coast and several major battles took place. In the end, the British won the war and forced the Chinese to sign the Treaty of Nanking. This treaty contained a number of humiliating terms for the Chinese. One of the most important was that China had to cede Hong Kong Island to Britain. Britain also gained control of several other territories in addition to the island. These included the city of Guangzhou, where the Chinese had surrendered. The British also gained access to 5 more ports along the coast. In addition, they were given the right to travel freely throughout China and to set up their own courts there. But perhaps even more importantly than these territorial gains was the fact that the Chinese had to pay a massive indemnity to the British. This was supposed to compensate the British for the cost of the war and for the loss of Chinese goods that had been seized during the conflict. The amount of money that China had to pay was astronomical and it severely weakened their economy. So why did China give up Hong Kong so easily? There are a number of reasons. First, the Chinese were already weakened by decades of internal strife. They had recently faced a number of natural disasters and rebellions, and this had taken a toll on their military and economy. In addition, the Chinese government was corrupt and inefficient. This made it difficult to raise the resources necessary to fight a war. Finally, the Chinese underestimated the British. They thought that the British were only interested in trading with them and that they would never try to start a war. Because of all these factors, the Chinese were unable to put up a strong defense and they eventually lost the war. There is some evidence that the Chinese leaders knew that they would lose the war before it even started. This is because they had received a number of warnings from other European powers. For example, the French had recently fought a war with China and they had warned the Chinese not to start another one. Additionally, the Russians had also warned the Chinese not to go to war with the British. Despite these warnings, however, the Chinese leaders decided to go ahead with the war anyway. One of the main reasons for this was that the Chinese were under the impression that the Europeans were divided among themselves and that they would not come to the aid of the British. Unfortunately for the Chinese, this was not the case. The Europeans were actually very united, and they all supported the British in their war against China. This was because they were all interested in expanding their influence in Asia, and they saw the British as an ally against the Chinese. Another reason why the Chinese lost the war was because they did not have the resources to fight a modern military power like the British. The Chinese army was still using outdated weapons and tactics from the Middle Ages. They also did not have the industrial capacity to produce the weapons and supplies needed to win a war. In addition, the Chinese government was corrupt, and this made it difficult to get resources to the soldiers who needed them. As the war dragged on, it became clear that the Chinese were not going to be able to win. In order to end the conflict, they had to sign the Treaty of Nanking. The main purpose of this treaty was to restore peace between China and Britain. However, it also contained a number of humiliating terms for the Chinese. One of the most important provisions was that China had to cede Hong Kong Island to Britain. At the time, Hong Kong was just a small fishing village, but the British knew that it had the potential to become a major city. They also gained control of several other territories in addition to the island. These included the city of Guangzhou, where the Chinese had surrendered. The British also gained access to 5 more ports along the coast. In addition, they were given the right to travel freely throughout China and to set up their own courts there. In addition to ceding territory, the Chinese also had to pay a massive indemnity to the British. This was supposed to compensate the British for the cost of the war and for the loss of Chinese goods that had been seized during the conflict. The amount of money that China had to pay was astronomical, and it severely weakened their economy. So why did the Chinese agree to these humiliating terms? One reason was that they were desperate for peace. By this point in the war, the Chinese had suffered too many defeats and they just wanted it to be over. Additionally, the Chinese government was corrupt, and this made it difficult to negotiate a better deal. Finally, the Chinese underestimated the British, and they did not realize that they were dealing with a ruthless imperial power. As it turned out, the Treaty of Nanking was just the beginning of China's troubles. Over the next century, China would be forced to sign a number of other treaties that gave away even more of their territory and sovereignty. This period of time is known as the Century of Humiliation, and it ended only with the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949. In the end, China was able to regain much of their lost territory and power. However, the damage that had been done to their national pride and sovereignty would never be forgotten. The loss of Hong Kong was a major blow to Chinese pride, and it would not be until 1997 that Hong Kong was returned to Chinese control. I hope you enjoyed learning about why China gave Hong Kong to Britain in 1841. If you want to learn more about this topic, I encourage you to check out the additional resources. Thanks for watching. In the tumultuous 19th century, China found itself under immense pressure from European powers eager to expand their influence in East Asia. Among these powers, Great Britain stood out, driven by a desire to boost its commercial interests and military strength in the region. This drive culminated in the First Opium War between 1839 and 1842, a conflict that severely weakened the ruling Qing dynasty and resulted in a significant geopolitical shift. The war ended with the signing of the Treaty of Nanking in 1842. An agreement that not only brought an end to hostilities but also marked a turning point in Hong Kong's history. This is the story of how the First Opium War and the Treaty of Nanking transformed Hong Kong into a British colony. Before the mid-19th century, Hong Kong was just a small fishing village dependent on local trade and subject to the authority of Guangdong province. However, its strategic location at the mouth of the Pearl River made it a desirable possession for the Chinese. But after the closure of Canton, Guangzhou in 1839, when the Chinese authorities seized on British merchants for smuggling opium, the British realized the need for an alternative base in the region. This proved to be Hong Kong, which they began to occupy. Despite initial efforts by the Chinese to resist the British takeover, the Qing dynasty's military weakness during the First Opium War led to its defeat and the eventual signing of the Treaty of Nanking. The treaty contained several provisions that were unfavorable to China, including the forced opening of more Chinese ports to foreign trade, the legalization of Christianity in China, and the restitution of Chinese converts confiscated by the British. Most significantly for Hong Kong, however, was Article 3, which stipulated that China cede the island to Britain in perpetuity. This cession encompassed not just Hong Kong Island, but also the adjacent Kowloon Peninsula and the right to establish a military cantonment on the mainland across the border from Kowloon. The rationale behind granting Britain perpetual control over Hong Kong was to secure a base for enforcing the treaty's provisions and ensuring the safety of British subjects within Chinese borders. Furthermore, it provided the British with a foothold from which they could effectively monitor and regulate trade along the southern coast of China. The cession of Hong Kong to Britain was not merely a territorial transfer. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in the island's history, one that would see it transform from a modest fishing village into a major international city and a hub of British colonial power in Asia. The impact of the Opium War and the subsequent treaty profoundly affected Hong Kong's trajectory, setting the stage for over a century and a half of British colonial rule. Under British control, Hong Kong quickly developed into a bustling commercial center. The British recognized the island's strategic value as a gateway to the broader Chinese market and invested heavily in its infrastructure and governance. They constructed modern facilities such as deep-water ports, warehouses and paved roads, which attracted traders and merchants from around the world. Additionally, the introduction of British legal and administrative systems, though often in conflict with local customs, contributed to the establishment of a stable environment for business and trade. The British government actively encouraged the migration of Chinese and European merchants to Hong Kong, further diversifying its population and stimulating economic activity. This influx of people led to the rapid growth of the city, which soon became a prominent financial center in Asia. Despite its economic success, the colonial administration faced challenges. The close proximity of densely populated urban areas led to the spread of diseases like cholera and plague. To mitigate these health risks, the colonial government implemented measures to improve sanitation and public health, reflecting the complex realities of colonial urban development. Moreover, the imposition of Western legal and political norms often clashed with local Chinese customs and traditions. While the Chinese community largely retained its cultural and religious practices, the divide between the British elite and the Chinese majority created social tensions and disparities. The wealth generated by colonial trade and industry did not trickle down equally, leading to a significant gap between the affluent elite and the working-class population. The colonial government's focus on economic growth often came at the expense of social welfare, leaving many living in poverty. These issues highlight the ambivalent nature of Hong Kong's colonial experience, characterized by both remarkable economic progress and deep-rooted social challenges. However, despite the challenges, Hong Kong continued to prosper under British rule. Its strategic location, efficient infrastructure and favorable investment climate made it a magnet for international businesses and investors. By the early 20th century, Hong Kong had become one of Asia's most important financial centers, a position it has maintained for decades. As Hong Kong flourished economically, the question of its sovereignty remained a contentious issue between China and Britain. After World War II, as the Cold War rivalry intensified, both Communist China and the United Kingdom saw Hong Kong as a strategic asset. The People's Republic of China viewed the island as a lost territory that needed to be recovered, while Britain sought to retain control over Hong Kong to maintain its influence in the region. This tension culminated in the 1980 Sino-British Joint Declaration, a historic agreement that resolved the uncertainty over Hong Kong's future. The declaration, signed by both governments, stipulated that Hong Kong would be returned to Chinese sovereignty in 1997, marking the end of British colonial rule. This transition was not without its complexities, as both nations had to negotiate various issues related to trade, investment, and the rights of their respective citizens. The agreement reflected a significant shift in the geopolitical landscape of Asia and marked the end of an era in Hong Kong's history. Today, Hong Kong stands as a testament to the profound impact of the First Opium War and the Treaty of Nanking. From a small fishing village, it evolved into a global financial hub, a feat accomplished within a span of less than 2 centuries. This remarkable transformation is a reflection not only of the foresight and planning of the British colonial government, but also of the resilience and adaptability of the people of Hong Kong. Yet, the story of Hong Kong is more than just one of economic growth and prosperity. It's a narrative of cultural fusion, of a society shaped by the confluence of Chinese and Western influences. The city's skyline, a blend of traditional Chinese architecture and modern Western design, symbolizes this unique blend. Similarly, the Cantonese language, enriched by loanwords from English, reflects the linguistic exchange between the two cultures. This fusion has given rise to a distinct hybrid identity, one that sets Hong Kong apart and has been instrumental in its success as a global city. However, despite its achievements, Hong Kong's journey has not been without its challenges. The social disparities, the political tensions, and the struggle to balance tradition with modernity are issues that continue to shape the city's character. As Hong Kong moves forward, it does so with the legacy of the past firmly in its sights, striving to uphold the values of hard work, resilience, and cultural exchange that have been the cornerstones of its success. In conclusion, the First Opium War and the ensuing Treaty of Nanking stand as pivotal moments in Hong Kong's history. The war, though devastating for China, inadvertently set in motion the events that would transform Hong Kong from a sleepy fishing village into a vibrant metropolis and a global financial hub. The cession of Hong Kong to Britain under Article 3 of the treaty marked the beginning of this remarkable journey. While the treaty's provisions were initially unfavorable for China, they inadvertently sowed the seeds of Hong Kong's future prosperity. The strategic value of the island, coupled with British investments in its infrastructure and institutions, fueled its economic growth. Despite the social challenges and political uncertainties that marked its colonial past, Hong Kong's journey to becoming a world-class city is nothing short of remarkable. The story of Hong Kong is a complex tapestry woven with threads of triumph and tragedy, of cultural fusion and political turmoil. As we reflect on its journey from a small fishing village to a global city, we recognize the profound impact of the First Opium War and the Treaty of Nanking. These events not only reshaped the geopolitical landscape of East Asia, but also laid the foundation for Hong Kong's unique identity as a city bridging the East and the West. Hong Kong's story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the allure of opportunity, and the enduring legacy of those who dared to dream big. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more historical content. Thank you for watching. In the early hours of January 1898, representatives from two vastly different worlds came together in the Chinese capital of Beijing to sign a treaty that would change the course of history. On one side sat diplomats from the fading British Empire, eager to secure their hold on the strategically important region of Asia. On the other were officials from the declining Qing dynasty, hoping to protect their country's interests while staving off complete humiliation at the hands of their foreign oppressors. What resulted was the Convention of Beijing, an agreement that would see the British gain control of one of the most valuable pieces of real estate in the entire world, the new territories of Hong Kong. But what exactly did this agreement entail? And how has it shaped the city we know today? At the dawn of the 20th century, Hong Kong underwent a radical transformation in its political, economic, and social destiny. Under the Convention of Beijing, the British Empire and China's Qing dynasty agreed to extend British control over the new territories for 99 years. This marked a pivotal turning point. The Second Opium War ended with the Treaty of Tianjin, which ceded the Kowloon Peninsula to the British. At the time, these territories were seen as strategically insignificant. Hong Kong Island served as a minor entrepot and penal colony while Kowloon was sparsely populated. However, London soon realized the potential of the region and desired greater control. The surrounding areas known as the New Territories comprised of over 1,600 square kilometers of land and included areas like the Kowloon Bay, the Eastern New Territories, and Lantau Island. For the British, securing these territories was crucial for several reasons. Firstly, it would bolster their strategic position. Controlling the approaches to the South China Sea would help protect British interests in India, their prized jewel in the crown. Secondly, the new territories held immense natural resources including fertile lands for agriculture, abundant fisheries, and untapped mineral wealth. Lastly, having control over these areas would ensure the security and expansion of Hong Kong as a commercial hub. Despite their desire for the new territories, the British were well aware that acquiring them would not be easy. China's ruling Qing dynasty had initially resisted ceding any more territory after the Opium Wars. However, by the late 19th century, the Qing were in a precarious position. Internal rebellions, economic decline, and pressure from other foreign powers made it difficult for them to stand firm. The British, sensing an opportunity, initiated a series of negotiations in Beijing. The talks were complex and multifaceted, touching upon various issues from territorial concessions to diplomatic protocols. After months of intense discussions, the Convention of Beijing was finally signed on September 1898. The agreement allowed Britain to lease the new territories from the Qing for a period of 99 years at an annual payment of 1 million Chinese dollars. While the lease officially began in 1898, the British did not take full control until 1902 due to logistical and administrative challenges. The convention also stipulated that the British were prohibited from annexing or incorporating the new territories into British India. Instead, it was to be governed separately as part of the colony of Hong Kong. The leased territory was substantially larger than the previous British holdings, expanding their influence in the region significantly. Economically, the lease triggered an unprecedented boom in Hong Kong's growth. The new territories, which now constitute over 80% of Hong Kong's total land area, provided vast spaces for urban, agricultural, and industrial development. This rapid growth can be attributed to several factors. Firstly, the new territories offered an abundance of resources. The fertile soil in the plains of the east and the rich fisheries in the coastal areas provided the foundation for a thriving agricultural and fishing industry. This, in turn, supported a growing population and fueled urban development. Secondly, Hong Kong's strategic location at the crossroads of international trade routes facilitated the flow of goods and ideas. The island's natural deep-water harbor made it an ideal hub for shipping and trade, attracting merchants and entrepreneurs from around the world. This influx of businesses and investments spurred economic expansion. Thirdly, the introduction of modern British management and accounting practices helped modernize and professionalize Hong Kong's economy. Although initially slow to adopt these practices, over time they proved instrumental in laying the groundwork for the efficient financial systems the city is known for today. Fourthly, the British government implemented policies that encouraged immigration and foreign investment. As the colony grew, so did the demand for labor. The government actively recruited immigrants from neighboring regions, including those from southern China. This diverse workforce contributed to the city's dynamism and growth. Socially, the integration of the new territories led to significant demographic changes. Thousands of Chinese migrants moved from the mainland to Hong Kong, creating a multicultural and multilingual society. This influx led to the emergence of vibrant ethnic enclaves and a fusion of culinary traditions. However, tensions often persisted between the native Cantonese population and the new arrivals. Additionally, the British government's land and resource policies sometimes favored non-Chinese residents, leading to social unrest. Despite these challenges, Hong Kong evolved into a model of East-West coexistence, blending elements of traditional Chinese culture with modern British institutions. Education was a key focus during this period. The British introduced English language schools to promote literacy and technical education. They also established universities such as the University of Hong Kong, which played a role in shaping the city's intellectual landscape. Health and sanitation also saw improvements with the construction of hospitals and public health campaigns. However, disparities in healthcare access and quality existed between different communities. Politically, the lease had long-term repercussions. As the 1997 expiration approached, a major crisis emerged over Hong Kong's future. Would it revert back to Chinese control or would another solution be found? Negotiations between Britain and China resulted in the one country, two systems policy. This agreement ensured Hong Kong's semi-autonomous governance under Chinese sovereignty, allowing it to retain its capitalist system, legal system and way of life for 50 years. However, the terms of the old lease continued to cast a shadow. In 2047, when the 99-year lease officially expires, the future of Hong Kong will be fully determined by China. This has led to ongoing debates about identity and sovereignty. Many Hong Kong residents continue to grapple with the question of whether they are primarily Chinese, British, or something else entirely. The city's unique blend of Eastern and Western influences has been both a source of pride and complexity in defining its identity. The impact of the new territories lease on Hong Kong's development has been profound. From a small trading port, it evolved into a global financial hub, a feat made possible by the infusion of British capital and expertise. Yet, this growth came at a cost. The displacement of indigenous communities, the introduction of foreign diseases, and the social tensions that arose from rapid urbanization all left their marks. Furthermore, the legacy of colonialism continues to shape Hong Kong's political landscape. Despite the one country, two systems framework, uncertainties remain regarding the city's autonomy and its place within China. The ambiguity stemming from the incomplete transfer of sovereignty serves as a reminder of the enduring impact of the past on the present. In conclusion, the new territories lease was not just an administrative contract but a cornerstone in shaping modern Hong Kong. It brought unprecedented growth, introduced new cultures, and left a lasting political legacy. As Hong Kong looks towards its future, it does so with the echoes of its colonial past resonating in its urban centers and its minds. Understanding this history is vital for comprehending the complexities that define Hong Kong today. From its humble beginnings as a small trading post to its current status as a global financial hub, the journey of Hong Kong has been nothing short of remarkable. Its evolution serves as a testament to the adaptability of its people, the impact of global events, and the complexities of its unique history. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this episode and want to learn more about our world before 1900, please consider supporting us. We have lots of exciting content planned for 2023 and your support will help us to keep this channel alive.